finished applying my gesso and glitter to my mint macaron background piece. And you can take your circle piece that you've done earlier and you can lay it on top and just make sure through those holes that you have enough glitter showing and gesso and that you're happy with it. So I'm going to set this piece aside to dry. Now I actually want to repeat the process of adding gesso and glitter around the edges of this piece and also around the edges of each circle, but before I do that I want to actually add a little bit of ink to make these stand out. So I'm using smoky slate ink and I'm going to take a finger dauber, and all I'm going to do is just run my dauber around the inside of these circles like that. And I'm going to take my finger and I'm just going to smudge that a little bit just to keep it nice and soft. I don't want any harsh lines on this card, being a baby card. I want to keep it nice and pastel and soft in appearance. So I'm just again taking my finger, and because we have gesso on there, that's going to smudge and blend really, really easily. So I'm going to continue all the way around that circle like that, smudging it, and then I'm going to let all of them dry. I'm also going to do the same around the edge, and then I'm going to add my gesso and my glitter as I've done before. Well, I've done my inking now, and you can see that that's given a nice subtle edge to my shapes, to my circles and the outside of my card. But before I add my gesso and glitter, I've decided I actually want to add a little more dimension to this background and a little more shimmer. So I'm going to be using my shimmery white embossing paste for this, and I'm going to be using this cute little circle stencil. I use this a lot actually, I really, really like it. And I'm just going to add a little bit of embossing paste here and there with my palette knife over the card. So sort of just want to add it in sections. Okay, like that. And I just have those sort of placed over the background, and that just adds a little bit more shimmer and a little bit more texture. To do the circles, all you need to do is just get a little bit of gesso on your finger and just kind of dab it around the inside edge of that circle like that. I just do half at a time, and then I just drag it through the glitter on my paper like that. And now I've finished putting glitter around all the circles and around all the edges also. Now we're going to set this piece aside to dry. Well, now we're going to get stamping, and I'm going to use a new stamp set that I've just purchased, and I absolutely love this stamp set for a baby. I think they're so cute, all these animals. It's called Wildly Happy, and we're going to start first of all with our larger circle. So I've got all my circles here. This is what we're going to be stamping on. Now the largest circle we can actually set aside because I'm going to actually stamp a sentiment on this one. So I'm going to set this one aside. And I'm going to start first of all with my second largest circle, which is this one. And this is going to be my focal point image. And I've decided to use the beautiful little foxes because I think they're just so cute and they look great in a circle. So I've got my stamp already applied to my stamp block. And I'm going to be using some Memento Tuxedo Black ink for this. So I'm just going to ink up my stamp really well. And I'm going to put my green down the bottom so it looks like grass, like that. And I'm just going to center my stamp in that circle. Like that. There's my little foxes, so cute. Okay, so I'll set that aside. Now the next one I'm going to work on is my smallest circle, and I'm actually going to stamp a little part of the sentiment here that says little one. I'm going to stamp that in this little circle. Just going to put it right in the middle, like that. I'm going to set that aside to dry as well. I'm just going to use my chamois to clean off my stamps. Now the next technique I want to show you is actually some partial stamping. That's part of the reason for this tutorial. I wanted to show you that you don't have to use the whole image, although we have in these two. For the rest of these circles, we're actually only going to be using part of the animal's image, just to show you that you can, if you have a smaller space, you can still use your stamps. So we'll start with the elephant. First of all, we're going to pop him on the block. And then I'm going to take a mask I've made earlier. Now I have just taken those dies, those 3 middle-sized dies for these circles, and I've actually cut that out of just plain copier paper. And that's a really good thing to do because it allows you to audition your stamps and see what's going to look best. So you can actually take your stamp cover and look and see what's going to look best. Now I'm going to stamp through the next largest circle. I'm actually going to stamp my elephants, and you can see that obviously they don't fit on there, but because I'm focusing on these little babies, I thought if I stamped it so that part of the mama elephant's missing but the baby is in here, it's kind of capturing the essence of that, the love they have for one another. It's sort of focusing more on that than the whole image, which I really like. So again, you can take these other circles. So I'm thinking this next size, I'll put my bunnies in there, and I don't want to set it right in the middle. I'll probably offset it a little bit, maybe put that little baby bunny more in there. And then finally, the next circle down, I'm going to put my little pandas in there, and you can see their little faces just fit really beautifully in there. So this is a really handy thing to have, and you can actually fold it up and keep it in your stamp set if you want to use it for later. So the way we're going to do this is, as I said, I'm going to do my elephants, and I'm going to be using this size circle for that. So I actually need to get a larger stamp block. I'll be back. Hey, I'm back. I just needed another stamp block for this technique. Now we're going to ink up our elephant as we normally would. To ink that up. And then I'm going to take my mask and I'm going to place this on here, deciding where I want it to be. And I think I want that little baby, I kind of want them to one side. I think that might look nice to one side. And I'm going to take my circle. I'm going to keep the green down the bottom. And this will now act as a guide for me to place over the top. Now once I have that, I'm going to take my larger block that I got and just pop that over the top and press. So I'm kind of stamping from the other way, like that. And there you see I have my little elephants partially stamped in that circle, but positioned where I wanted them to be. So let's try that again. I'll just clean off my stamp. And the next one we'll do is our bunnies. So, oh, I've already got him on a block. Okay, I've got my bunnies. And we're going to ink him up, ink them up, like that. And I'm going to use this next size down which is this one. And I think that will look pretty good. So I'm going to grab my circle. Make sure the green's down the bottom. I'm just going to place it there. And in my block and stamp it. And there we have, again, our little baby is mainly in the image with mama to the side. Okay, and finally for our smallest one, we're going to do our little panda faces for that one. So we'll just bring in our pandas, there they are. We're going to ink them up as well. And we have our shape ready here, our circle. And we're just going to get their little faces peeping through this hole, like that. Turn our circle around and pop it over our mask like that. And I can use a smaller one for this. And there we have our cute little pandas faces also. And now we have all our stamping done, we're going to get ready to colour them. I've decided to go ahead and stamp my sentiment before I actually begin my colouring while I have my Memento ink out. And for my sentiment, I'm using another new stamp set I've just purchased called Special Celebrations. And there's some really lovely sentiments in this. It's actually a 2-set stamp set. And I'm going to be using this beautiful sentiment here. The world is full of miracles and none so precious as the one on the way to you. So to do this, I've decided to take a piece of Whisper White cardstock, which is about 4 by 10 centimeters. And I gessoed this piece as well, because remember that will change the color. Now when I'm gessoing cardstock that I know I'm going to be stamping on, I make sure when I brush it on, I grab my finger and just work it into the cardstock, and that gives it a nice smooth finish. So we don't really want brush strokes when we're trying to stamp. So I've got my stamp onto my block and I'm just going to ink it up. And I find it easier to have my cardstock a little bit bigger so that I can trim around it. That way, if I'm a little bit crooked with my stamping, I can fix that up with my trimming. So I'm just going to stamp that in the middle. Like that. And now you can see I've got a bit of ink here that I actually stamped on the edge of my stamp, but that's okay. I can actually trim that off and trim around that. So you can see that is a little bit crooked on there. That's why I like to do it this way, so I can trim it and even it up a little bit. Well, I've finished trimming out my sentiment now, and as you can see, I've actually decided to round the corners as well to match the roundness of the circles on the project. And to do that, I've used our Detail Trio punch. This is a really awesome punch. It does a few jobs. You can actually round the corners as I have done. You can also add a decorative element if you'd like in the corner as well. And it also acts as a hole punch if you have a tag or you need to put a hole in something. So it's a really cool punch for that. And that's all I've done for this. I've also taken a piece of mint macaron and I've made a mat for that, and I've rounded the corners also. So to get my sentiment lined up, I've decided to use my Stamparatus for that. And all I've done is I've taken my largest circle and I've placed my magnet in the middle, just on a straight line. I've used my grid paper to make sure everything's straight. And then I've lined up my stamps either side because this sentiment is actually going to sit in the center of those. So the So Tiny, So Small, So Loved by All came from the Wildly Happy stamp set, and then the Welcome Baby came from the Special Celebrations stamp set. So I've used both of those for that. So all I'm going to do is bring my lid over. Now I have those lined up where I want them. I'm going to use my Memento ink and ink up my stamps. And there's my sentiment stamped, and that's going to fit nicely in between. I've finished preparing the elements for my sentiment now, and all I've done is around the actual sentiment here, I've sponged on some mint macaron ink around the edge first, and then a little bit of smoky slate to match out the rest of our card. And I've outlined all the pieces in gesso and dipped them in some glitter so that they will match everything else.